All right. Hey, everybody. We are live. As always, there's probably people running late. We are streaming across YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So, as well as through the Balkans website. So, wherever you're watching, hey, everyone. Um, so we will definitely gonna dive into the content in the next 3 minutes, but we'll give a few minutes for everyone to join, tune in, get comfortable. We usually do these events at 12 o'clock, but today we do 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific time, because my guest Uri, he's joining from LA. So without further ado, I'm just going to bring on Uri real quick here, and then we can kick off.
Hey, Michael. Actually joining from San Francisco today, but it's on the same Pacific time zone.
Oh, yes, from California, San Francisco. Right. Sorry about that. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. We had so much fun in London. I appreciate you again for taking the time. And I love that we have this kind of follow-up conversation, because we've talked about some marketing, but we didn't talk about all the marketing. So I'm really happy to have you. And
I'm a big talker. Just ask my family.
All right. So what I'll do, let me put on the slides real quick here. All right, so just a quick intro for those who don't know me and see me first time. Although I am a ongoing host of this events from Belkins, I am co-founder, chief growth officer. Although me and Belkins have sales background, because like lead generation has been predominantly part of the sales team, and outbound outreach, whatever. But as the industry have been evolving, we moved to marketing. Now outreach is the part of the marketing, kind of. So I don't know, so Udi, maybe you can comment on this or not, but I mean, I talked a lot to CMOs, and they own the outreach budget these days, and we integrate a lot with like inbound and outbound to create this kind of all bound mix, whatever. But that's why I'm very pleased to bring on Uri here, who is ex CMO at Gong, and chief evangelist officer, and the author of Courageous Marketing, who I have over here. I love the book. I have the autograph as well, which I really happy about. And I know that for this study, we've talked to over 100 CMOs from different B2B companies, and about 40% of them said like, we would love to also get Uri's book. So we shipped the book to a lot of them, and that's why I tried to let everyone know that, oh, by the way, the book is shipped. But in case you just found out the book in your porch, well, that was for me and Uri. So great reading. I already had a few responses from people saying that they love the book. So kudos for that, Uri. Really
Awesome.
inspiring. There's like every entrepreneur, when you're coming up, you read the shoe doc. A Nike shoe doc is just a go-to. And when I was reading your book, that is full of stories and reflection and just the cases that you've had, I had the same feeling. I feel like you wrote an evergreen book, to be honest with you, that would be relevant.
I appreciate it. Shoe dog is like way up here, so just to be in that same category is amazing. Now I sound one of the Oscar nominees that didn't win, but just to be nominated in that category is quite the accomplishment.
Yeah. So guys, if you hear us, see us, wherever you are, feel free to hit a hi in the chat, be active. It's an open mic, so we'll be bringing on questions from the chat as we go. We also going to be talking with you in the chat. So it's a live discussion, although we cannot see you, because it's going to be difficult to bring everyone on and give the mic. We might stay here for like a while, so we only have 60 minutes. So that's why drop your question in the chat, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, or watching directly from Balkans website. We're going to see this. We're going to bring on the questions. We're going to discuss them. Maybe Uri has some questions or some comments on whatever. But yeah, let's engage and just generally share positive emotions for everyone, because it's been a difficult week for everyone. So all right. So what I'll do, I'll just quickly jump on the first question for today that I'm very curious about, because we didn't talk with you about this in London. But what are you hearing? Where do budgets move lately from 2025 to 2026? Did you notice, based on the people you advise, you talked a lot of, CMOs chats you're part of, like other people are changing the way they're looking at the budget for this year comparing to what they had last year? Any changes, major ones that?
Yes, the I think three things that stand out when I'm talking to heads of marketing and changes that they're making. Number one, clearly there's a shift from SEO type of content and strategy to AEO and GEO type of content and strategy. So everyone's still learning the new LLM search engines and how to make them like your content. At the same time, they're dealing with a drop in traffic from the search engines. And so now the focus, in some ways, has changed, but in other ways, if you go back to the basics, it's about providing really useful content that positions you as an authority on your topic so that the search engines highlight you as a source. Those who are digging in know that certain websites that you appear on seem to rank you higher, whether it's Reddit, G2, and sources like that. But a lot of the searches are going to end on the search engine because people get the answer that they're looking for. And unless they're ready to buy, they're probably not going to go to your website. And that's something we're all going to have to adjust to. The second trend is really about going back to the basics. And that is people are rediscovering that small in-person events like dinner events, breakfast events, side events at industry trade shows, those typically have the highest ROI of almost any marketing activity. And I hear that over and over again. Doesn't even matter what the size of the company is. I've seen this at very large public companies and also young startups. If you can get 15 to 50 people in a room, get them some drinks and food and talk about something, maybe bring a customer to host that they want to hear from because everyone likes to learn from their peers. Everything is so much easier after that event to do follow-up and get a demo call or explore an opportunity or get a warm intro to someone else in their company. So those intimate dinner events, if you're not doing them, you probably should be because they work in practically any industry and any company stage. And then the third one is when we're looking at technology spend and experiments, everyone's clearly experimenting with AI tools right now. There's a mixture of let's buy all these point solutions, plus let's try the new AI capabilities of some of the larger platforms that folks are using, and three, let's build our own. And I think people are still in the experimentation stage, trying to stitch together those three types of tools. And I suspect, just like in sales tech, where we've seen in the last 2 years a great consolidation, we're going to see that happening in marketing. It's probably even starting now. Just this morning, if you've read the news, you heard that Apollo acquired Pocus, a small AI company trying to help marketing and sales teams. And apparently they needed the acquisition to continue to grow. So I think we're already starting to see that consolidation of the AI MarTech tools.
I've heard for a fact that it's very difficult to get the budget approval from CFO if you don't have AI in that, in that budget request. So if you're spending your budget into something more traditional, they're like, I don't know. But as soon as you put like, hey, it's an AI that would help us to do that, then CFO is like, all right, we have that budget there.
I think that's short-sighted. If I go back to quoting my CFO, Tim Ritters, he always says when people come to him asking for budget, he says, everyone talks to me about the I in ROI, but nobody talks to me about the R in ROI. So talk to me about the R. For those unfamiliar with the term, ROI, of course, is return on investment. So rather than just asking for investment, talk about the returns. Like, how is this going to help our business? So I think that's a better, healthier approach to acquiring any sort of technology or making investment. Like, what do we expect this to do, and how can we prove that it's working? Many of the tools that we're going to buy today have AI. Some of them are kind of plumbing. Maybe they don't need AI. I had a plumber here an hour ago. He didn't use any AI, and he solved the problem I had. I had a leaky toilet. You still need to get those things done.
Yeah. So what you see here on the screen is based on the survey that we've done with, again, as I mentioned, over 100 B2B marketers across mid-market enterprise, people that are spending, hundreds to millions of dollars in marketing. This is what they're saying. I like to this point number 2. Only 1 out of 7 are happy, very satisfied with their ROI, whereas like the 85% say like either we're okay or less than that. Do you think we're gonna see this number even growing more? Because like I feel like I was more happier with my marketing last year, and now just because of the speed of like how things are changing, I'm still catching up. And because I'm catching up, I'm not leading from the front like I used to. I'm like just trying to adapt.
I I actually think we're always going to be unhappy with our ROI for the most part.
Mhm.
At Gong, we have a nice way of putting it. We're always positively discontent. So even if we're doing well in some areas, we want more. And want more is literally one of our operating principles at Gong. I think a better way of looking at ROI is to split our sort of run of the mill demand gen channels and then set aside experiments, because experiments by definition are going to have very low ROI. They probably cost more than they yield overall, because that's the idea of experiments. But if you look at where you're spending the majority of your budget, which hopefully for mature companies is on tried and tested channels that are working, the ROI there is probably much better than on your experiments. I think by separating it, and there's further ways we can cut a budget. We can say, hey, we're putting 10% of our budget on brand investments, which we know is going to be extremely difficult to measure in the short term. But here's the majority of our budget that's going on demand gen, on things that we expect to produce positive ROI. And then I think you might find out that some things are working better than others, or better than you thought they were.
Have you always had budget for experiments, even through tough times? Have you always tried
I
to
have.
allocate? You have?
I have, and I talked about this in my book very briefly. I don't think any marketing team can survive or evolve without an experiments budget. And I always tried to get something between 5 and 15% of the budget. When things were
Mhm.
going extremely well, and we managed to lower our cost of acquisition in the run of the mill demand gen, we could get maybe 15%. When we were struggling in the main efforts, maybe it was 5%, but we always had something. And the way I justify this to the CFO or CEO is in 2 ways. One way, I say, look, any channel that's working for us right now is going to tap out at some point, because Google will change their algorithms, because people are going to shift to searching on AI search engines. We
Right.
don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is changing their algorithms. Something is going to stop working. I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow or next year, but I know it's going to happen. So to stay on top of it and make sure we don't have a dip in our demand gen when that happens, I need to be experimenting with new channels all the time. Even if everything is working fine today, it would be dumb of me not to be experimenting, because one of
Right.
these channels is going to stop working maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. So that's number one. The second reasoning is there are going to be marketing opportunities that we're all going to agree that we want to try, but I don't know about them at the time of budgeting. So let's say
Mm.
most teams on a calendar fiscal year do budgeting in October, November for next year. Some events that are going to happen in the second half of next year, they're not going to be announced before April of next year, because the big events, they announce the event a year, sometimes 2 years in advance. The smaller regional events, they only get announced a couple of months before they happen, maybe 6 months before they happen. So if I don't reserve a budget for some of these marketing investments that I know we're going to agree that we should be at, let's say an industry event that my customers are going to be at, my competitors are going to be at, of course I want to be there. If that's not announced while I'm budgeting, I won't have a budget for it, and we're going to regret not setting aside a budget. So those are the 2 ways that I was always able to secure an experiments budget.
Interesting. What about the breadth, focus versus breadth, right? Like, so, do you think that, marketing teams, and I've been part of it, like we need to stretch ourselves a little bit too thin and try to do social and events and outreach and content and paid ads and just do a multitude of different, or just be more focused and double down on several things that we know it's our DNA or we're good at, and just kind of pushing them.
I think focus is almost always the answer.
Mhm.
Focus is almost always the answer. Every marketer listening to us today is feeling stretched and that they don't have enough budget and they don't have enough people to do everything that they want. And here's a spoiler alert. It's not going to change even when your team is 5 times larger. I took the team at Gong from 1 marketer to 60 marketers. We always felt stretched. We always didn't have enough budget. We always didn't have enough money. I talked to marketers at companies like Google who told me they're outsourcing some of their work to agencies because they don't have the internal resources to run Google ads, if you can believe that. They're using agencies to run their own Google ads on some of their products because they don't have internal resources to run that. How crazy is that? Most of us imagine, oh, if you're at Google, you have all the resources in the world. No, they don't. Like every marketer and every team is always going to feel stretched. And since that's a given, focus has got to be the answer. By spreading yourself thin like peanut butter across all the different channels, you're going to be mediocre at best at all of them, which means your cost of acquisition is going to be very high. Your ROI is going to be very low. You're probably not going to hit your targets. The smarter strategy is to pick a much smaller number of channels that you can realistically excel at and be really good at. Focus on that. Now, you've got to pick it right, and you've got to really become an expert on that, and then you get an edge. For example, if like in Gong's case, we found that LinkedIn is one of our top channels. So we don't focus a lot on other social media, but we become experts at LinkedIn. And when I say experts, that means we read the engineer's blog and understand in real time what changes they're considering to the algorithm. We test those on a regular basis. Just because video worked last year doesn't mean it's going to be the best way to capture people's attention right now. So you've got to be experimenting with everything from their carousels to the images to the text only, with the spaces, without the spaces, with the link in the comments, without the link in the comments. We've got to do this all the time. And just because we figured out something, it doesn't mean it's going to be that way next quarter, because the algorithm is changing, the landscape is changing. We have to keep testing these things all the time. And if you think that sounds like a lot of work, you're right, it is. And so now you hopefully understand why we can't do this for 20 channels. We can do it for 1, 2, maybe 3 if you've got a sufficiently large team and budget. So that's usually going to be the answer. Focus on what's working and get an expert and become an expert on that, so you actually have an edge and can produce decent ROI.
I would call Gong and what you've done with Gong marketing team, you guys are like kings of content, because like your content is just legendary. And I have here that 70% of the responder, or a lot of the responders said that they say that content is #1 channel in terms of the effectiveness. However, only 37% are planning to increase that budget in 2026. Why do you think people are so reserved? And can you give them some arguments from top of your mind about like what they can do to increase, to increase that budget? Or
I don't know that increasing the budget is always the answer, because if you have a finite size of an audience, there's only so much content you can bombard them with, right? They can read maybe a blog post a week and a couple of social tweets a week. They're not going to read a 200-page book for you every week, even if it's very interesting. So I know at Gong, we probably almost tapped out the amount of content that we can put out to our relevant audience. So I'm encouraged to see that marketers are saying that they find it to be 70% effective, which seems kind of high compared to some of their other investments. But if they're not willing to increase the budget, that means they're either already tapping out that audience and they're at risk of burning them out, because there is such a thing as sending too many emails and producing too much content for that audience. So I don't know that increasing the budget is going to be the answer. But for those not doing it and not seeing ROI from content, I absolutely encourage them to experiment and produce such high quality content that people would be willing to pay for, and content that they would want to consume if they were in their target audience.
Yeah, makes sense. Last on this slide is paid advertising. we've kind of realized that at our size and because of our spend, your conversion and your optimization is so good that your costs are low for this channel. So it just makes sense to put more and more budget. Like Google, specifically for Google, it loves to consume more budget and give you the lower costs. And we've seen that the agencies that are spending less, let's say that have $5,000-$10,000 budget, or like the other firms that have a smaller budget, they cannot get as much value from paid ads because they don't have the volume to optimize the algorithm, and they don't have data, they can't build lookalike audience, they just literally don't have that. So I have a hypothesis, and that's my CMO also agree with me, that very soon, like the bigger companies or companies that have a bigger spend is going to be too big to fall. They can just get all the like the placement that you can get, and it's going to be very difficult to access that bar when you're smaller to kind of beat them. So there will be a handful of, let's say, the 20% of the market dominating the 100% of this, especially now with like how the Google page is looking, because if before you had the organic like paid pages, and now you have ads basically on the top, in the middle of the page, on the bottom of the page, and so on and so forth. What do you think about those kind of the
Okay,
argument?
that's a very nuanced topic, so I'll share a few thoughts, but I won't even attempt to kind of exhaust all the arguments on that.
And get the light
Okay,
while you're talking, just quickly.
go ahead. So where do I start? First, looking at what Google has done in the last 20 years, it has tried to prevent an outcome like you described, where a small handful of big spenders can control the search results. I've seen at Gong, and I've seen other companies I work with, even if they're very small, if they work smartly and have a little bit of a budget even, they can get good placements, both organic and paid, if they work smarter than some of the big spenders that are just throwing money at the problem. And I suspect that Google and now OpenAI and the other search engines are going to continue protecting the people using their engines, because when you and I go to ChatGPT or Google, we're looking for information. We want the best answer to our question. We want the best information in the field that we're looking for. We don't want to see just the big sponsored results by the handful of big spenders. And since the business model of OpenAI and Google depends on a lot of the search volume continuing and growing, I think they're going to continue to protect the quality of the responses that they provide. So I'm optimistic, and I think even if there's a moment in time where the big spenders seem to be taking over your feed, I think that's going to kind of level out like it has in the regular pre-AI Google search engine, where even if you're a startup, you could get to the first page and beat some of your big competitors if you really provide the best answers and have the right references and all the other things you do to optimize content. So that's one. Two, I think the discussion gets very nuanced when you separate search paid ads from social paid ads and other types of paid ads. It really depends on the maturity of your category and understanding of what people are searching for. I'll give an example. In the early days of Gong, when we were creating what we called then conversation intelligence, can you guess how many people were searching for it? Exactly zero.
New category,
So
right?
Google provided terrible ROI. I wasted a little bit of time there, quickly saw that there's nothing I can do to find the people that could potentially get value from my solution. And I went on to do other things. I created thought leadership content and used my organic channels to get it out there via organic social, email, and speaking opportunities to educate the market on the problem that we're solving. And then gradually saw inbound coming from that. And once we launched 3 years later, the revenue intelligence category, at that point, we had a lot of followers and we were tracking monthly searches for revenue intelligence. And in October of 2019, when we launched that term, there were exactly zero searches, and now there are thousands of searches. So you've got to track these things and reallocate your budget spend according to what's actually out there. You can't create search volume where it doesn't exist overnight. That's a multi-year effort in most cases. There are very few exceptions to the rule, but there are. So you've got to, you always go back to the rule, which is, where's the party at? Where's your audience hanging out? That's where you should go. If they're at an industry event, you should go pick them there. If they're on LinkedIn, go find them there. If they're on YouTube, go find them there. But you can't force it, and you can't bring them to your website before you actually find out where they're at.
Yeah. As someone who started in a new category of email drivability back in 2017, when the email drivability wasn't a thing, and you successfully obviously went through that, and I failed because we're not very educated in terms of how we're going to cover our customers. So we've tried pulling the interest and search where there was zero, right? And we failed a lot of budgets because of that. Exactly to your point, right? Like I was just on a different side of it, right, with the new category. So yeah.
Sometimes that's the tuition we need to pay to learn something new.
Yeah, but well, now I know. Like someone will, it from from the success, and I know from a failure, right? All right. So yeah, for those people who just join us, guys, the chat is open on LinkedIn, YouTube. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We're gonna discuss as we go, especially if this question is relevant for the topic we're discussing. We're not gonna have a QA at the end. We just have this open mic style. So drop the question. We're gonna stop, discuss it, and then move to another one. We don't have many slides because I really wanted to tap into Udi's experience and bounce a few thoughts of him, and share my failures, which I have a lot, and ask Udi's success. So the question for the chat and everyone listening to us: is there any channel that surprised you the most lately? And the same question for Udi to you, like from the people you're working with right now. Is there any, or you're seeing any specific channel that has been surprisingly good these days? You've mentioned the networking and events, dinners. I think
That's
that's
one. Yeah, and another one that I think to me is not very surprising, but a lot of people are not using it or not using it enough. So maybe it's worth mentioning is gifting. Uh, I've seen both at Gong and at other companies I've worked with really good results by using gifting for B2B buyers. Obviously, you can't do this if you're selling a $1,000 product. You're not going to start sending gifts in order to get them, or maybe a digital coffee card. But for larger deals, when we're talking 10K, 100K, definitely large enterprise deals that are larger than that, a smart gifting strategy really, really helps get those initial meetings and get deals unstuck when someone goes dark on you. And here's the rationale. Emails we can easily ignore. A lot of the emails I get, I never open. I delete them or ignore them without ever opening them. Social, it's so easy to ignore something in your feed, and even if something really good pops up in the feed, by tomorrow it's dead. If I didn't catch it yesterday because I was on holiday, you just spent all your money on creating that content and distributing it to my feed, hoping that I'd see it, but I missed it. And I could go on with other channels. With gifting, that's one of the last channels where you get 100% of attention on it, because if something lands on my desk, if I get an actual package delivered to my office or delivered to my home, I can't ignore it. I've never taken a package and unopened throw it away. Nobody does that. So you're going to get 100% attention. And once you understand that, it makes me wonder why people are not using it more often. Now, I'm not suggesting we need to bribe our buyers to talk to us, because it can be something quirky and funny that cost $15, but shows that you did some research and that you're committed to speaking and helping this buyer. We've seen success with sending a mug with some funny message on it relating to something personal of that buyer. One of our SDRs saw a random post by one of her buyers, and he was talking about how he loves bananas. She literally sent him a bunch of fresh bananas from a grocery store, and that got her a meeting because she noticed he likes bananas. So if you do something sweet and quaint like that, you'll often get a response. One of the SDRs we had at Gong had a long streak of success by taking the LinkedIn photo of his prospect and then ordering a dozen cupcakes from a local bakery where they print the face on the cupcakes and have that delivered to the office. If it was local, he would go deliver it himself. He got 100% response and meetings from sending that. If someone's going to the trouble of delivering a dozen cupcakes with your face on it, it's going to make you laugh, and you're going to say, okay, you earned the meeting. So these things don't cost a lot, right? It's, I don't know, cost $30 to send those cupcakes. just go do it.
Yeah.
If you're selling large enough deals, you might be surprised if you're not utilizing gifting enough.
When I was starting out my career in sales 12 years ago, I remember a client that I've been selling to publishers. And I remember a client, the meeting I had a client, he was like, Michael, I took this meeting because I just wanted to, to talk to someone and say, hey, you guys been so persistent to chasing me to get this meeting. I've told you no, like whatever, 5 times. Okay, you get it. Let's talk. Um, the point that I'm making here is probably the times where you can get the customer just being persistent enough are gone. Like I think like people are more annoyed these days of just that persistence because of the automation or the number of the number of people that are pursuing you for a certain period of time, right? So I think like what you're saying, and I like is like we didn't try to be creative enough, and creative enough it's not sending an AI video or the personalization video on YouTube and saying, hey, Michael, let's talk, but rather like leveraging what the others are more difficult to do. Like you cannot automate the cupcake delivery with the AI at this point, probably, right?
Right, right. I mean, there are tools like Sendoso and ReachDesk which allow you to automate some of the gifting if you have a larger team. But some of our best enterprise reps, they just go on Amazon, order a gift, use their credit card, and expense it, and that's how they get their meetings with what becomes seven-figure clients. So not everything has to scale. And you're right. Buyers appreciate when you do something that's clearly not automated. When you send them something with a handwritten note, for example, that's clearly personalized and not automated. But there's one important point I need to make, because I don't think serious buyers are taking meetings because we send them bananas or cupcakes. It's because we reached out with a relevant message. We reach out with a relevant message that they understand how this might be helpful, but we're not the only ones reaching out with the relevant message. So when you couple the relevant message with very creative, persistent outreach, that's what gets you the meeting.
Yeah,
You could write the
obviously.
best email,
Yeah.
but an email alone, one email is probably not going to land you many meetings. But if you add to that the bananas and the handwritten note and the cupcakes and the dinner event, then they realize that if that's the kind of commitment that you're showing in the buying process, they're imagining that that's the kind of commitment they're going to get from you if they become a customer, and that sets you apart.
Yeah. I love that you brought this up because a lot of people thinking about how do I scale this before they figured out their ideal client profile and their like buyers. And I often seen customer coming into us and saying, "Hey, here's our ICP," and then in 6 months or 12 months, their buyer committee could be a bit different, right? Like literally, and the ICP could be different. So before you really get to know them and know that okay, these are actually the people that I'm solving the problem to, rather than like hypothetically, if you don't have the data to back it up, it's going to be very difficult. You can create that kind of scalable personalization, right?
Dave Gerhardt and the team he had at Drift a few years ago wrote a really helpful little book called "It Won't Scale," which is exactly about, I think it was like 40 different marketing campaigns that don't scale. Some of these gifting ideas, they don't scale. If you do a small dinner event, it's the same amount of work. If you do one, or if you do the third one, it's going to be the same amount of work. And if everything you do, you look through the lens of how can I scale this, you're probably missing out on a lot of great marketing opportunities. Now, again, if you're doing consumer marketing or doing marketing to very small deal sizes, you do have to find things that scale, because otherwise it's not going to be a positive ROI. But for those of us selling multiple $1,000 deals and above, we should always be thinking about what's not going to scale that my competitor is not doing, because they're just looking to click a button or hire an agency to do the work for them. If you do something creative that doesn't scale, you might actually get a lot more attention and ROI and faster deal cycles.
I have a great example about this. So one of our clients who who bought Belkins and started working with us, we've in the contract we put like 20 20 SQLs or meetings, 20 meetings booked or opportunities, whatever. And because they said like, hey, our cost is, let's say 1100 per, right? That's my cost. So if I go higher, then it doesn't make the numbers, right? So 6 months forward, we've made only like 12 or something, or 14, like 60% or something, right? And then they're like, okay, guys, well, looking at this metric is not very good because like we overpaid double that, right? But then when we look back into what those meetings were, and all of them, or majority of them, were SQLs and opportunities that went into the pipeline, then they're like, oh, actually for those type of meetings my costs are on par, because like they made sense for me. So then they were like, okay, well actually this is not good, this is good, because like then we look at the pipeline. So I think to the point also that you're making is, like, if we're looking at only like the scalable channels like the MQLs, or how we drive this traffic, or have the cost, but even those not scalable strategies that your SDRs were doing, or the DNRs or something, if you can actually calculate the cost of that opportunity that have a higher conversion, then you might be even lower than you would spend with any scalable channel, because their buying intent or their conversion might be higher at the end. So you can track back
Correct.
to the pipeline, right?
A good example is any in-person event, whether you're setting up a booth at a show or doing a more intimate dinner, anything in person is probably going to be the most expensive campaign that you do, short of maybe a Super Bowl commercial. But if you do anything in person, it just costs a lot of money. There's travel expenses, there's getting the booth, there's providing food, there's giveaways at the booth, there's sponsorship of the show. All these things cost a lot of money, but multiple marketers I've spoken with have shared with me that their highest ROI is from in-person events, because even if you get 20 people at a nice restaurant for dinner, Gong buys out a Michelin-starred restaurant every year around Dreamforce, and we pack the place with, I think, 50 or 80 prospects and customers. And that event, it costs a lot of money, I'll tell you that, because we're shutting down a Michelin-starred restaurant during the busiest week in the city. But it always has incredible ROI, because we touch millions of dollars in pipeline, we touch millions of dollars in existing customer ARR. And we've looked at the follow-up, because we've been doing this for years now. The renewal rate of the customers who attended and the win rates of the prospects who attended are so high that there's clearly positive ROI, very, very high positive ROI, even though we might be spending $1,000 per guest that evening.
Mm-hmm. I think what your like example you made is like you already get to the point of understanding how you're going to harness this channel. If someone like myself who never done this, I'm looking at this like, oh, holy shit, I'm not sure whether I'll be able to utilize that opportunity at that kind of level, right? But having this in mind that, okay, this is the point where I want to go to, and how do I start getting there is important.
Well, you don't have to start with $1,000 dinner, right?
Exactly.
There's plenty of nice restaurants where you can probably get $100 or $150 dinner all included. Start with that. Get 10 people in the room. You don't need 80.
I have a partner who I work with. They try different channels. They are like a HubSpot consulting firm. They do like a lot of technology implementation, and they couldn't tap into the GTM that worked for them really, until they tried the events and the conferences and the in-person, and that just opened up for them. So now they're spending probably 40% on their budget, just literally going out there, like even on the micro, like industry based, like a credit union, one, or even less than that, not even the bigger ones. And they're just opening up opportunities. And then they always talk to me like, Michael, this is like, that's been a game changer for us really right now. Like just doing that. Obviously their average deal size is on the higher end, but like, they got to that point, but they kind of through iterations, they've done a lot of iterations, right? So
there's very few free lunches in life. If you're trying to do something cheap and scalable, then everyone else is doing it. So if you end up just posting on social and sending emails, all of your competitors and all of the other companies competing for your buyer's attention are doing the same thing. You have to be willing to do something more than that to get their attention. Even if you have the best product, the best service, you have to be willing to do more than that, whether that's flying out to a customer, sending them a gift, inviting them to a dinner, do whatever your competitors are not doing. And that gives you a better chance of converting those folks.
Yeah. So what you see on the screen is the overall satisfaction score across the channels from people. Only 42% are, happy, like 4+, and then the average score is 3.35. I think that the point that you made, Udi, earlier is like marketers would never be happy with like where they are at. If you are already very happy about satisfied as well the channels, you probably are not doing everything wrong because you're missing out the opportunities, right? But like if you can give one advice for people to move from less satisfied to being more satisfied in terms of how they're operating or planning or doing things, what is there anything there that you can share?
I don't know if being satisfied is a goal that we should work towards. But maybe being more realistic about budget goes back to what I suggested earlier about separating the channels that we've tested, and we have a baseline, say from last year, and we can extrapolate and say, you know what, this year we're going to do something similar, or we're going to try and improve our efficiency by 10%, and we can safely estimate what we think we're going to get out of this. That's a good baseline for your budget. And if you hit that number more or less, you're probably going to be okay. And it's going to be an easier discussion with your sales leader or with your finance leader or with your direct manager. But the experiments channels, I think we need to be honest and say, we don't know. We're going to try a bunch of things. We know what the best case scenario looks like, but here's a variety of scenarios. The worst case looks like this. It might be zero. We know what it's going to cost us, but let's assume we're going to get zero out of it. And then there's a realistic use case somewhere in the middle. And then there's a very best case scenario where we might get that. I think you just need to be honest about these things, because if you don't want to be part of the statistics of the 18 months tenure of a marketing leader, you don't want to overpromise and then consistently fail because you overestimated what you think you can do on channels that you really don't know what you can do with. So I think honesty is a great strategy, working with your finance and sales partners to say, here's what we know, here's what we don't know.
I am actually just moving on. I'm very surprised that we are doing not a lot of events only for marketing leaders and CMOs, and I'm surprised that people listening to us, this our audience today, are a bit quiet. Probably they're very tired after the week, or just we are doing so great work with you that people are like less active and just trying to kind of grasp everything and take notes and stuff. So yeah, guys, if you have any questions to Uri, or you want us to touch base on some questions we haven't discussed yet, feel free to jump in the chat and add it, because I know I'll be taking everything of Uri's attention to myself and asking my strange questions. So you can jump in. All right. So how did AI change about how you think about the channel ROI? We have a stats here that based on the people responses, the high amplification of the AI would be content marketing and SEO, email marketing, paid ads, moderate events, ABM, video, podcast, and then AI won't replace content first, events, cold outreach. Interesting here as well. So are there anything that you would add here in terms of amplification of the AI? Where do you think like AI could, again, what you see in 2025, 2026, maybe 2027, could bring the biggest amplification and the biggest maybe disruption in terms of the channels or campaign?
Well, one way I'm seeing companies think about it is using AI to automate things that we had to do manually. AI is getting better at this every day, and RevOps team and marketing ops team are changing to not just connect systems themselves, but run agents that are orchestrating a lot of things. There's some very fancy workflows going on there that just open your LinkedIn, you'll find lots of marketers showing off their great work. But I think AI is also giving us better measurement tools. So if you're looking at, say, companies like Paramark are doing great work helping marketers measure a lot of investments, especially in brand initiatives that were really hard to measure just a short while ago. And that can help give marketers the courage to go experiment with some of these things that maybe in the past they wouldn't have done because they're so notoriously difficult to measure. Now that we have better measurement tools that go beyond the first touch, last touch attribution, which is mostly bullshit, we can now experiment with more interesting things that AI allows us to measure better.
You've mentioned first and last touch attribution bullshit. Like, you've never been a believer of the attribution?
Or... Well, not in the run-of-the-mill tools that I've had the dubious pleasure of working with. They always make so many assumptions that seem like they're too far removed from the real world that I don't think they're very, very helpful. I've reluctantly used some of them at some points because we had to show some connection between what we're doing and what we're producing. But they're just based on such oversimplified assumptions about how people buy. And they saw this ad, and then they did this, and then they finally clicked on this, and that's what they made them buy. No, it doesn't work like that at all. They probably saw our brand in 75 different places in over 3 years that are not
Yeah,
captured anywhere on this dashboard. So giving all the credit to that last ad that they clicked is
yeah,
just, it's a lazy assumption. But
yeah,
again, AI is helping us uncover some of the real reasons that people buy, and even if we don't understand the real reasons, we get more accurate probabilistic answers these days, because it can tell us, hey, in the month where you spend 10% more on brand initiatives like maybe billboards and television, which nobody can click on and you're not going to see that on your dashboard, but during that same month you got 10% more traffic on your website and 10% more conversion. So there's probably a connection between those two things.
yeah,
So even understanding those probabilities, I think, is a big step forward compared to
yeah.
the lazy attribution that most of us have been using.
I bought I bought Gong last year. Uh, because I knew the brand for years, and I had Chris Orlob on my podcast, and I followed their journey. There's no way you can attribute my sale to any channel. Literally, it's not it's not an SDR. It's not like
Your fandom journey is complex. Yeah.
exactly over time, right? When you're doing that, yeah, probably you would want to change the attribution when you're doing like per like first year, second year, whatever. But if you're doing this for 10, 15 years, there's at that point the attribution is like just not non-existent, right? What about the metric as like influence the deals? Like I worked for a while with the Dream Data platform, and they have this cool metric of like how marketing and what channels are influencing the deals as a part, not the attribution, but the influence as the part of it. Do you think it's kind of the same? It's like apples, or it's a bit different?
No, there's a lot of nuance there. So here's an example, and I'm not familiar with the specific tool that you mentioned because I didn't use it, but I can share a in-house little experiment that we did and what we found. So a couple of years ago, we did a roadshow of 7 dinner events, and we wanted to understand the impact. And there's very little ARR sourced at these events because most people who show up and are willing to like forgo dinner with their family and come for 2-3 hours
Mhm.
to a business event, they're probably somewhere in an active opportunity and seriously looking at buying. So they're already in an opportunity or maybe a customer that we're looking to expand. And so the question we asked our marketing ops team and data analyst was, how did these dinners influence these opportunities? And I'll cut the story short, but we did a very simple cohort analysis of looking at all the open opportunities that quarter and
Mhm.
then separating them into the control group, which is opportunities that send at least one delegate to at least one of our dinner events. And the control group, the first is the treatment group, the second is the control group, which did not attend any of our events. And then we looked at every imaginable aspect of the opportunities,
Mhm.
win rates, deal size, deal velocity, a number of other seats, and so on. And we found that in many aspects, those events didn't change anything about those opportunities. But in 2 crucial areas, they did make a difference. We found that the win rate and the deal size pretty much doubled for those opportunities that showed up to one of our events that quarter. And armed with that information, we could start calculating real ROI. And when we showed that to finance, it made it very easy to get budget to do the next roadshow because we showed that
Return.
we're influencing millions of dollars of pipeline, whether they're active opportunities or existing customers. So sometimes the measurement is simpler than we overcomplicate it sometimes. Just need to know what the right question to ask is.
Yeah. What's the biggest budget mistake you've seen B2B marketing teams are doing right now? Is there any that you can outline as number one? I can say that people are just linking, they're reading LinkedIn a lot and just following all the the posts. Like I cannot go to LinkedIn these days. I just go and 9 out of 10 posts about how people are using AI to automate something that works amazingly, and now they're adding like 500 deals, in a second, whatever. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe my audience is just all the GTM growth.
I would just maybe give a friendly reminder that the tool is rarely the solution.
Mm,
Um, the way to increasing productivity and effectiveness of your marketing efforts starts with the problem. What are we trying to solve for? And then figuring out a robust, sometimes creative solution to that problem. And the solution is probably going to have some systems attached to it. It's definitely going to have some people attached to it. It's going to have some process and budget attached to it. But there's no magic tool that's going to solve your problems. There's no magic tool out there that's going to solve all your problems. And if your approach to budgeting starts by, oh, I'm going to spend this much on tools, or I'm going to increase my spend on tools because that's going to solve the problem, I think that's a mistake. Maybe your solution is buying more cupcakes. That's not an AI tool, but people still love cupcakes just like they did before AI. Maybe it's doing more dinner events. You don't need any technology for that. So start with the problem and figure out the solution to solve that problem. It may or may not involve tools, probably will to some extent, but just thinking that putting more budget on AI tools is going to solve your problems is not going to lead to the right solution.
Yeah. All right, we're coming up to 8 minutes before we finish. So there's a few last insights wanted to share. So the first one, what are the future budget investment plans? Basically, where our market leaders are trying to cut. So I like this first one, review platforms, 46% abandonment. I'm one of those guys, by the way. I've been working with Clutch for 9 years, spending a lot. And we've cut that budget down because when AI came in now with like ChatGPT and others, like just I feel like we're getting more AI traffic now rather than the review traffic, and the quality of the conversations that we've getting from those like went down drastically. And I know G2, I think they bought Capterra and the others. They're trying to kind of solve something, but generally, do you think like in the age of AI, like the third-party platforms, like would they be like a review platforms where people be generally reading review and it doesn't make sense to pay for placement with them anymore? Or there is still a business model where you would need to pay for platforms, or people will abandon them and these platforms will be just a source of reviews? You know what I mean? So the ChatGPT still needs to source reviews from somewhere, but the placement that you're going to be paying to put in the top of the rating on the G2 or Clutch, it would be obsolete. What do you think about this?
I think social proof will remain an important decision criteria for buyers. How that is served and collected will probably change. So in the past, as a buyer, I might have gone directly to G2 and read reviews of a product that I'm considering buying or comparing two different products. And that in turn created good intel for those vendors, because if they're paying G2, they got an alert that I'm on their website comparing two vendors. I think the vendors still want to know that because now they know I'm a hot lead, and at least they know which account I'm coming from and they can approach me. Today, they're probably getting a lot less traffic because AI can summarize and synthesize hundreds and thousands of reviews and just give me the top 3 things that each vendor is good at and bad at. And so that's way easier as a consumer or potential buyer to consume than reading dozens of reviews. 2, they're probably not even getting my traffic because I can now read that synthesis on ChatGPT or
Right.
Google without even going to their website. So I think they're rethinking their model and finding more reasons to bring people to their website, but also trying to capitalize on just being a very prominent source of the new search engine's feed. So that's what's happening there. I think placement as a category winner in every kind of mature category, people don't believe those fake awards anymore, and I think there's too many of them. Of course,
Yeah.
serious buyers know who they can trust and who they can't, and the 3 top ones are probably Gartner, Forrester, and G2, probably in that order. And then there's a bunch of no-name awards that I think most buyers know not to take too seriously, that everyone wins if you pay them. At least officially, you can't pay Gartner, Forrester, or G2 for a leadership position.
Yeah.
In G2's case, they look at reviews. In Gartner and Forrester's case, their analysts actually take a very long demo and create a relationship with each vendor before they put you in a report. So I think that's going to continue for a while, but the way we get served up those recommendations is probably going to change.
Yeah.
So bottom line, if you're a vendor, it's really important that a lot of people give you positive reviews and that
Right.
you show up in these analyst reports and review sites, because we know that buyers are doing 70 to 80% of their buyer's journey before they talk to their vendor of choice.
Yeah.
So just saying on your website that you're great is not going to be enough, because
Yeah.
by the time they get to your website, they've already chosen another vendor who had 1,000 reviews on G2 or a better location on a Forrester Wave or on a Gartner Magic Quadrant.
Yeah, well, my experience with this kind of review platforms is that, based on the budget you're spending, you would be just on a higher position in terms of the rating very often, and then you can change it to not the paid premium or like to just the free one, and then the free one go up. But what's happening is that a lot of companies' websites taking out that rating without creating the filter, and then listing their own top agencies based on the others, and then that picked up by the AI, and now AI create the top 5 agencies, not because these are the best 5 reviews, but because they are on the more of the ratings. But at the end of the day, everyone is sourcing information from the same G2. You know what I mean? So that's why we are still have to pay a little bit, but I also kind of cut a lot of the budget because like the actual placement now is not a lot in terms of the traffic. All right. So to round up, the last two this is where people wanted to increase the budget. So surprisingly, people would want to increase the email events, networking referrals, and then obviously the content marketing and SEO. Again, I think increasing in the content, I'm sure you agree as well, is always a good play if you know how to work in the content and do it. So
all of these channels can be very lucrative, and again, there's nuances depending on your demographics of buyers and the maturity of the category and your brand strength. So there's something to be done with each of these channels at almost every stage, but the balance is going to change based on all these parameters.
All right, and then the last one to ramp up is, what's your biggest channel budget dilemma in 2026? People can also click on the just scan the QR code and get the full report with all the insights. But if you haven't read that yet, if guys, everyone who's been with us today, appreciate the time. So if you have your dilemma, maybe Udi and I can spend 2 minutes and solve your dilemma. So the first one who will pose the dilemma, we're gonna solve your dilemma in the chat. Do you have a generally, I think like, okay, maybe you can help to solve my dilemma. So I stopped doing my own outbound because I realized that although I'm selling outbound services and I'm good at for my own industry, because I went and started selling high ticket prices in the lead gen, it doesn't make sense for a lot of companies right now, because they're like, it's one thing if we're going to spend $20,000, we're going to get this leads, but spending $200,000, like we don't have that budget yet. So it didn't become obvious. So I'm still thinking about restarting that outbound engine now. So that's my biggest dilemma, like in terms of the investments. When during your tenure with Gong, the business development team and the outreach was part of your function, or it was under different department?
It was in both teams at different times. So for the first 3 years, almost 3 years at Gong, SDR and all the outbound was under my team, under marketing. And when we got our first CRO in 2019, he requested that he owns the SDR team because he wanted more control over what happens there. And I handed over the team. He then politely asked me a couple of times if I would take it back, which I refused. But I've seen it work well, both under marketing and under sales. There has to be a leader who is passionate for managing this and knows how to do it. There are pros and cons to both ownership choices. Maybe I'll just mention one or two and we'll end there. In marketing, it helps marketing demonstrate how they're creating pipeline and contributing to the mix. In sales, it helps them create the next generation of AEs that graduate from an SDR role into an AE, and it promotes probably better collaboration between the SDR and AE function. So I think that's why we're seeing between 2/3 and 75% of organizations actually have SDR, BDR under sales. Sometimes I see the split. So the outbound SDR or BDR, whatever they call it, is under sales, and the inbound BDRs are under marketing because they respond to what's marketing is creating from the website. All of those can work. I don't think there's one that's categorically better. Just have to have a strong open communications between the leaders
Yeah.
of all functions and see where it makes the most sense to put the function.
The last few years, my BDRs, SDRs were part of the marketing function. Again, to the point that you made about just helping marketing to turn more pipeline, but that's didn't work well. So I'm now, because our buying journey is a spaghetti ball, as well as now more about the signals and intent. If the customers have signals and intent, we can just catch them. So I'm just putting them back into sales probably, and then doing a more like a targeted, with like ABM type motion, with like just as you said yourself, like fewer number of accounts, but that would yield a much higher ROI at the end, right? So let's say, let BDR go after 10 companies that we know that they would be clients until the end of the year, rather than focusing like they had under marketing. Let's get 50 meetings in the door, then didn't convert them. So all right, well, we are finishing up. So thanks to everyone again for joining up. We're gonna have the recording available on YouTube and LinkedIn as well, so people can see the recording if they or just go back and watch something, as well as this kind of report. And then everyone, please go and buy Courageous Marketing book. I'm going to promote the book instead of you, Uri, because like I really enjoyed it a lot, and I think it's a great book for marketers and just a great reader. So you can get it off Amazon, right? And paper copy, by the way, has a low shipping fee in the US. I know it's like just a couple of dollars or something, but Uri, thank you so much for joining me today and speaking in front of our audiences. And I love the fact that we've tapped into more marketing insights from you, because on the podcast, which by the way, stay tuned, Moody and I have a 90-minute podcast conversation that will be out in the next few weeks. So definitely check it out, because today we talked about a few different things that we obviously haven't covered on the podcast. So there's a total different conversations that would make more sense even together, right? So again, Uri, thank you so much for taking the time and spending the time on the podcast and now with me and with the audience and everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and hope everyone enjoyed it. So because I am very excited.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Ending.